Hello, and welcome to this first podcast for Radio Conscience on Truth is Here. So we have a very special guest tonight. His name is Dr. Mike Castle. He has specialized in environmental investigations and research of the American, Canadian, and global air contamination operations, frequently referred to as chemtrails. He wrote many interesting papers, like The Methodic Demise of Natural Earth, an Environmental Overview, which was written in 2003. The companion document is a proposed draft law written by Dr. Castle entitled The Unified Atmospheric Preservation Act 2008. All of these papers can be found on Dr. Castle's website on www.castleconcept.informationsolve.com. The link to the website will be right below the podcast whenever I post this interview. So, but tonight the topic won't be chemtrails or anything like that, but it's going to be related a little bit. It's going to be, we'll discuss natural magnetic energy with Dr. Castle, and without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Castle to our show. Hello, Mike. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. And good evening to you, Jean-Francois, and your listening audience.
Thank you very much, Mike. Good evening to yourself. So, I've heard you time and time again talk about natural magnetic energy and the benefits of it. So, why not start off right off the bat by talking about it?
Wow.
How did it start? How did you become aware of the natural magnetic energy that you also referred to as orgone energy?
Okay, let me backtrack this thing just a little bit without smoothing anything over. Kind of like dust on the trail.
Mm-hmm.
Just think of this in your mind as, what in the world is natural magnetic energy? And it's like, wow, what an odd thought. Yeah, I mean, you know, where does that natural magnetic energy come from? One will ask. Yes. Because every time someone says natural magnetism or magnetism, natural magnetism, somebody will invariably scoot the word and staple electromagnetic to it. This is about the things that have to do with the non-electronic field. This has to do with nature's, the Earth's biomagnetic field, which was established back before there were dinosaurs. This is in the Precambrian era. This is like forming Earth Company. If it's been here 4 other times, this was between the 3rd and the 4th. And people, I can tell you, there is a story behind that particular comment also about us entering into the 5th. Okay, go back to that era. There was bacterium, and these exclusively ate rock and ore. Mm-hmm. And various ores, in fact, would be excreted by this bacterium in the form of a iron crystal, iron crystallite. And these iron crystallites, in fact, were embedded with the Earth's natural magnetic field right then. That was a 10. That was a 10.
So
that was a 10.
The electromagnetic element was not present then.
Was not present.
Okay.
And how many people do I hear on the radio, these academians and jump the fence academians and so on and so forth, going to tell people the truth now? Yeah, I hear you. How come you didn't do that 20 years ago? Eh? Just got a question for you. But I keep hearing them harp about electromagnetic Earth. Wait a minute. The Earth has an electromagnetic field? I beg to differ with you, sir, but that is a natural magnetic field, not an electromagnetic field. Electromagnetic field would say that it had a positive and a cathodic in the same like a grid formed with two poles.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that would be electromagnetic. But the same thing will form naturally, but it doesn't follow those strict lines of grid in any way, shape, or form. They're natural forms of energy. Now, go back again to the embedment of the Earth's natural magnetic field right then with this excretion of this small crystal, iron crystal, which has a composition of Fe3O4. Okay, that iron crystal today can be found embedded in granite coming from those eras, and once it erodes away, it can be harvested, and that's called black sand magnetite. That's how we get black sand magnetite. And that's why it's so unbelievably valuable as its form of all this surface area of black sand magnetite. Now, black sand magnetite, that's got a 10 in it. That's got a 10. We're standing in a natural magnetic field right now, what's left of it, because they have virtually an electromagnetic grid flowing across the top of it and through it. So what's left, in fact, is our natural magnetic field, which I'll assign degraded to at least a 4. Now remember, my perspective is from the environmental and the geological and all things combined, and that's how I've been able to trace what this route looks like. And that route looks like we've got a 10 coming from this black sand, natural magnetic energy. Oh, what does metal, does it attract the metal? Is it magnetic? Yes, it is magnetic, but it doesn't have the same force or properties that electromagnetism imparts into iron. So, but it has even more property if one, in fact, is to take that same energy and you form a matrix with it. Let's just say you pick water glass, the same thing that's used in ceramic frit materials, in ceramic glazes, and certain ceramic materials, okay, sodium silicate. Now, you take and you put this into a matrix binder of sodium silicate. This matrix binder is water-based, and at the same time, you form it into any shape you want to. You can make a little mud cake out of it, whatever your heart desires, okay? Or you can make a pendant, which we do make, and you take and you pre-wind copper wire onto crystals. And these are, just take your standard quartz crystal and just be sure and wind it ascending to the right, a right spiral. And the one on the other side, the crystal on the other side, wind it in the opposite direction. So if you're standing in a different place, you look and you're still giving it a right ascending spiral, but you're going the other direction, okay? These are opposing spirals that are wound on the crystal. Didn't invent that either. Tesla did. Tesla said any energy form passing through these crystals can be spun, and he was talking about electrons going through the magnetic frequency, if you will. But he said this spins this energy. It spins energy. If it's light energy, if it's laser energy, if it's electromagnetic energy, or natural magnetic energy. It spins this energy through the crystal, a right spiral, a right ascending spiral. And by doing that, it erupts out of the end of the crystal. This magnetic energy comes out of the crystal in a magnetic vortex. It's a natural magnetic vortex. It's virtually everything that Wilhelm Reich described about orgone energy. And not to be prophetic, Jean-Francois, but I said that a long time ago. I'm probably one person who has actually said natural magnetic energy and orgone energy are one and the same thing because they have identical properties. They're masses without energy. They've also been called God's energy. They've been called so many things, but if God did make an energy, this is it.
I have a question, though. Is polarity present in natural magnetic energy?
Yes, it is, and it exists as a magnapole.
Magnapole, okay.
A magnapole, not a dipole. These are magnapoles.
And what would the difference be between the polarities of electromagnetic energy and natural magnetic energy?
Okay. I'll take a stab at that because if you've got plus, then that means you have an electron. You've got a positron.
Uh-huh.
But not necessarily because we don't understand it because we're standing in a natural magnetic field, so really nobody knows anything about it. How can you detect a magnetic field if you're standing in a magnetic field? Duh. Okay. But if you spin that into a vortex, which has properties, yeah, you can detect these vortices with just a simple ammeter or just one of those real cheap ones, and you get microvolts. You can actually detect microvolts an inch from the end of the crystal into the air. It's just really, I've always wanted to do the Carillion thing, but then again, we're not talking about static voltage. We're talking about something that has a different voltage parameter. And aside from that, I believe this right ascending vortex, which, by the way, is elliptical in its orbital to the right, just like a clock. But just imagine that being an oval-shaped clock. And that is an elliptical orbit. I also have found that right in the very center of that orbital, there is a counter-rotating vortice. There's a counter-rotating vortex, and that serves as the cathodic, if you will. So the right spinning vortex with the opposing vortex spinning inside of it forms the perfect magnapole in the same field of energy. And don't let me get you lost with talking about stuff like that. Mm-hmm. It's just so simple to understand. There's one vortex, and then there's a vortex inside of a vortex, and it's spinning in the opposite direction. This creates its own field effect.
So it's a twin, let's just say, reverse tornado. So there's the outer one would spin, let's say, counterclockwise, and the inner one would spin the other way around. Is that it?
Well, that's coming from two crystals. I'm talking about one vortex coming from either crystal.
Okay. So
and that vortex, in fact, has a vortex of its own in the center spinning in the opposite direction. So, yeah, you've got two vortices with counter rotation. And like I said, if you think about it too long, I'll guarantee you'll get lost.
But what are the practical applications for natural magnetic energy?
I found out that it does so many things that I can't begin to tell you. A good study would be to what Wilhelm Reich, in fact, had to say about it and the things that it does. The one property that I thought was just blew my mind is the way that if you associate this vortex with a tree, any tree, and let's just say that tree's got big roots too, okay? Because this works, these vortices work at the root level in a counter-rotating fashion, and also from the top. One thing that we found is that you can, in fact, sector this in your mind. You can virtually imagine a large spinning vortex associated with this tree. Live wood amplifies this energy. Live wood amplifies this energy. So see, it's not electromagnetic whatsoever, because you have to have conductivity. This has got its own conductivity and with amplitude.
And so it makes basically it makes the vortex larger.
It's huge. It's huge coming out of the crystal pendants that we make. But see, and they're ceramically bonded. But just take those vortices coming from that itself, or something else I developed years ago. It's called an aperture. Because what we're doing, we're focusing something. We're focusing energy, and it is erupting in this huge, massive fashion, and it's enveloping a tree. Tree loves this energy. Loves this energy. I just can't tell you enough about that. But let's just go to what it does. If you've got a tornado coming right at you, it will either neutralize or deflect. Guaranteed. So? And it goes to 100 miles out. Whoa. From where I'm sitting, we've diverted tornadoes coming right out of Indiana, right towards right down Interstate 70 corridor. We've diverted those tornadoes, and they went somewhere else, but they stopped their easterly track, and in fact went south, and then they started their easterly track, a southeast track again, and it killed a bunch of people. But we diverted it from the area where there's some people who also had this aperture. That's one of my daughters. She's the one that makes the pendants. Okay. But she had a lot of magnetite, and all she did was she had a bucket of magnetite, and she just stuck the biggest crystal she had in it with a wire around it. And that's all you have to do. That's as easy as it gets.
So with enough of these apertures, as you call them, you could basically have a blue sky all the time?
You can have a blue sky, but nonetheless, it doesn't interfere with natural weather. But see, folks, there's no such thing as natural weather. I knew that back when I wrote The Methodic Demise of Natural Earth. I knew that then because I seen how they were able to control all of the elements of the Coriolis forces using certain types of chemicals, very, very toxic chemicals, bariums forming hydroxides in the air, laid with moisture, and they would zap those with microwaves from the HARP satellites and able to shoot those off into a certain direction. They could create any weather they wanted to, irrespective of what your natural weather was supposed to be. Like here where I'm sitting, we've got spring a month early. I'm not kidding you.
I noticed.
It's really scary.
Even here, it's we got the flies already. It's incredible. I mean, it's mid-March. I mean,
right.
March. Today's the March 19th, and we have a whole bunch of flies already. It's I've never seen that in like 50 years. This early. It's
well, the weather is completely dictated by NOAA, National Oceanics Atmospheric Administration, and just look at them. They're all friggin' Russians. They're all Russians. Look at them, please. I'm trying to plead with your audience to start checking out some of these things. The weather, in fact, is completely controlled. It is artificial weather, but they're trying to change your climate, and they're relatively close to doing that. Wouldn't you agree?
Is there a weather war going on? Or is there something we don't know?
How can you have a war with yourself? It's just them.
But I mean, from country to country?
They control everything. Oh, maybe the Chinese think that they're doing stuff. They are. But it doesn't make any difference. Their weather is being obfuscated and completely tyrannically changed. And just watch. They will go through famine. They will go through starvation. And that's when it really gets nasty in this old world. But let's talk about some of the properties. Some of the properties outside of it will start attracting good weather. It will bring natural weather back to life. If you put enough of these apertures around, It will attract wild things. Wilhelm Reich said that, not me. And it does. The first year I put these up, there was a beautiful red-tailed hawk that landed in our backyard and was sitting on the fence. I lived in a ghetto. I lived in that part of Columbus, Ohio, that was virtually a ghetto. You know how long it's been since there was a red-tailed hawk in those parts? But nonetheless, it attracts wild things. It attracts geese. It attracts birds. It attracts animals, raccoons, possums. It attracts what is natural to that area. And it reinvigorates itself because those animals are there. Those plants are there. It's just the most amazing natural thing I've ever seen. It's actually reinstalling the natural environment. What better thing could we possibly hope for or pray for than our environs to be restored? This is revival here. I didn't discover anything. I just figured out how to use it.
Okay. So if I understand correctly, if everybody in a town, let's say like Columbus, Ohio, everybody had a aperture, as you call them, in their backyard, no modified weather would be possible over that town.
Oh, yeah. It would form a dome. And the dome would, in fact, go out to 300-400 miles. I'm not kidding you. There's something that's enveloped here, and it's called radionics. And I'll guarantee you, man, they don't want you talking about this kind of stuff on the radio. They don't want anybody to hear that word, radionics. Well, I thought we got rid of everybody doing anything about radionics. Yeah, but I figured it all out again. I did. You can actually will good weather into your region. Let's just say they're going to throw you into a drought because they're going to put potassium bromide in the chemtrails, and I guarantee you it's going to dry your air up. You ain't going. That's the same kind of stuff they put in cigarettes, by the way, as fire retardants. So you inhale it anyways. But it's going to suck up all the water. It's going to desiccate all the air. So water never falls upon that land. You just seen a grand example of that just last year down in the desert Southwest and the great drought of 2011. And those out there that know or live in that region, they just know how bad it was. Okay, what this will do, it will unwind that, actually diffuse the chemtrails that cause the desiccation from falling into your area. I'm not kidding you. You can form an electromagnetic
dome.
A natural. See, I'm doing it again. Electromagnetic. No, you're forming a natural magnetic dome around the area, and it don't take everybody in Columbus. Just 5 or 10 people. That's all that you need. Actually, you just need one.
So these chemtrails would be what, deflected?
They are deflected. Because they are in fact powered by electroconductivity. As a matter of fact, they are pushed out of these jets, in fact, with a positive charge on them.
So if I understand the physics correctly here, the natural magnetic energy repulses the electromagnetic energy.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
That's correct. I know this is crude as far as the things we're talking about, but I can't tell you anyone that knows anything about the properties of natural magnetic energy, because I'll put this right there, because the reptilians didn't want us to know this. They didn't want us to know that this is the premier energy field. This is everything that scalar comes from. Biological scalar wave. It happens the same. And now we've got the scalar waves as a weapon. But this natural magnetic energy will also deflect that, because they use electromagnetic to generate it, all ELF wave bonded with microwave, and they send that through strata from a submarine, and the island of Haiti, in fact, have 200 and some thousand people die. But they didn't hit the Dominican Republic. It's like the same rock, you know. Yeah, well, they're good. They got good targets. And Chavez said that the night that happened, the next morning that quake hit Haiti. But you can deflect the scalar wave. And there are people here in the U.S. doing that right now.
In your opinion, would the same weapon have been used on Japan in March of last year?
Absolutely, and that's exactly what I said. Every time I've been on the radio, I've said the same thing. No, that's got the very signature of a deep bed scalar-induced quake, and that's exactly what it was. Mm-hmm. They're using scalar wave with sonics, and it's not really imaginable all the damage they can do to substrata and the geology of Japan. It's setting on not so much fault zones, but it's at crustal plate terminuses and crustal plate. Just what they've done with the Gulf of Mexico. I wrote on that. I figured these things out. They're cracking the crust, and that's exactly what they've done. But it was right at the terminus of the formation of the North American tectonic plate system, with the Cocos down at the south and the Caribbean plate, and all these where they came together was actually pushing itself over to the edge of the neck of Baja California, and right there in Southern California there's a place that if you just look on an earthquake map and seismic activity and so forth, you find that pepper dotted every single day with earthquake activity. Big earthquake activity. 4.5s normally, 2.5s, 7s, and it's just up and down, up and down. What they have done, there's a hinge right there. There's a hinge for tectonic plate movement. What it was doing, it was getting the North American plate corner to impede itself, actually impose itself on the Pacific plate, which is right there. At the western flank of California, that's the Pacific plate. It was overriding and starting to push it down while the seabed and everything in Australia was coming up. Well, isn't that normally what would happen if you push down on a steel plate or a rock plate on this end here and then right across from where you're at? If it's on a teeter-totter, it's going to bring that plate up. So yeah, and that did occur. But that's all been done, obviously, with a lot of intention, and you can't understand who would possibly do this. And John Francois, for your listeners, let me be the first to tell you it's a species that you're just not really aware of, but they're right in front of you. They are everywhere. They have a reptilian background. Did you cough for a reason, or
No. I have a little cold.
You said no taboo words, and I'm thinking
no taboo words. You're totally free to speak your mind.
Okay, well, that's what these are. It's from a reptilian background, and whatever that might be, they could be from above your head, or they could be from below your feet. We don't know, but they're from one of them or both, and they're everywhere. And you can tell them by their one trait. They, in fact, have this worship of money and taking the money. The money is the only thing that matters to these species. But get this, they are also infested with demons. If it wasn't bad enough, they're infested with demons. They don't have no spirit whatsoever. They're soulless. And in this place, they have a demonic entity, and they're everywhere. Like the Russians at NOAA I was telling you about? Yeah. Mm-hmm. See, NOAA takes the weather and programs it and sends it to Belgrade, Belgium. And in fact, what is sent back? All the orders for all the drone aircraft, for all the pilot aircraft, all the commercial aircraft to start spraying chemtrails. All the orders are processed, and all the big tubes, like the one from China to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Dayton, Ohio, which takes 31 minutes. 31 minutes. You can't determine how fast that is. But it's all underground. And believe me, it's like drawing a diagonal line through Earth from here to China. That's where it's at. And I know people just can't believe, oh, you can't believe all. No, just listen, people. It's all around you. The information is all around you. And here it is. Here's what they're using this to practice with. It's to eradicate humans. We, humans, made in his image, kind. And the H is spelled with a capital H.
But how could the Creator, if we could call him like that, allow this?
Well, the Creator created Satan too.
Well, what would be the purpose then? I mean, of the human experiment?
Eradication. It's already underway. Yeah, all that soy stuff that you're eating, if you're males, you ain't gonna have no kids. You won't have to change poopy diapers when you're 35 or 50. No, because that won't allow you. That impacts your endocrine system and the way that your body generates sperm. And women, same thing with the ovum. Matter of fact, it tries to turn males into females and females into males. Go figure. But why? Because this species, this reptilian species, made a pact a long time ago. I'm going to guess somewhere in the era of the Druid priest. That's when all this bad stuff started happening. Yeah, they drew a deal with the devil and with other entities that we don't know about. Only spoke of in mythology. We're told it's mythology. But now we understand that was all real. Those things existed. Those entities existed. Those things that were called goddesses and gods. Well, we can't wrap our mind around all that, but I can tell you, I now know all that existed. It was not a fairy tale. None of these things are fairy tales. They're reptilian tales. And we've been trained and embedded, every single one of us alive today, with this crap for the last 200, 500, 5,000 years. We've been embedded with this drill to eradicate our populace from the surface, which we, human, made in his image kind, were assigned. We weren't assigned to under the ground or in space. We were assigned to the surface. They want the surface. Now I wonder if they get it. I wonder if they get it. Our climate, in fact, is completely changing.
Yeah, well, I noticed recently you had a big rash of tornadoes there in the Midwest and the state of Illinois, and I don't know, are those provoked?
No, those are spawn storms. Noah spawned storms.
Okay, so they're provoked.
No, provoke. Provoke, yeah. There's somebody pushing a button somewhere. Having a satellite send in a signal in the tops of the clouds, and in fact it's making this thing go crazy. But I call it bowling with tornadoes. I just keep telling Joyce Riley at the Power Hour, watch out, they're bowling for tornadoes there in Missouri. You know, and I've also told her a little bit about these apertures, but I mean, she's a busy lady. I haven't had time to explain anything.
But I'd like to know more because it's fascinating. I mean,
well,
these I know. You did send me a design, and I believe it's on your website. But can anyone build this?
Anyone, boy, what a cool science project for some kid, eh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No,
yeah.
But all this stuff works. We don't do anything but just put it together. You hear me?
Mm-hmm.
We don't worship her. It's not majestic. It's not magic. It's none of this stuff. It's natural magnetic energy. And you just happen to hear some guy talking about it one time on a podcast on Blog Talk Radio. Okay? It's always been there. I just figured out how to use some of these things. As I said before, I went through the tracing, let's just say of the gemology, tracing of what was this, and why did it captivate me? Well, I met Dr. John Milewski, and he's the one that harvests the magnetite. He harvests the magnetite at the base of the Sandia mountain range. And he started doing this as a hobby. And he's an old guy, and he's always tried to find somebody to help him. He actually invited me down one time and said, "Well, come on down." Maybe I should have, but be it as it may, his design concepts of the use of magnetite to magnetize water, and when you set a vessel of water on top of this magnetite and leave it there for 3 days, the water will pick up a full natural magnetic charge. But there is going to be something else in that water. It's called ormus. And Dr. Milewski discovered this when he exposes the water to magnetite for 3 days. It forms ormus, or white powder gold, or a form of an orme, an orbitally rearranged element. It forms an orme in the water without the magnetite being in the water. It's just sitting on a plastic bag of magnetite in a plastic container of water for 3 days, and it forms this ormus inside. How does it do that? I got no clue. I didn't discover that. Dr. Milewski did. See, these things that just pulled me into captivation because of the complete properties, set of property that you get from the ormes, the orbitally rearranged elements.
Okay, so are we talking about a modification of the water structure?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And I've actually detected that there is a higher contact angle on the water. There is just a slightly higher gravity after you expose it for 3 days. As a matter of fact, I've told people, I said, well, let it set for a couple of days. And I said, then just take and flip it upside down just a little bit, flip it upside down, and then put it back down. What that's doing, that's putting the more charged, heavier water that forms in the bottom of the containers. It disperses it so it can get more water. And it doesn't do any good to go over 3 days. Again, Dr. Milewski made that observation, not me. But there's just so many unplanned collaborative efforts to identify this. And what I started doing is going outside of that scope and looking at the properties of just natural magnetic energy, but spun from a crystal, which gives me a form that I can work with besides just the aura or the auric. And you take and spin these into these vortices. Now you can do so many of the things with this natural. You actually are able to relocate the magnetic energy, which you couldn't relocate if you just had it in your hand. So it's completely different because you've energized this thing with a natural magnetic spin. And again, Tesla discovered that. Ladies and gentlemen, not me. So I'm just saying this works for so many things, and the independent side of it, I just really can't begin to tell you all of the amazing properties that it has. But it does really weird things, like it doesn't slow time down, but when you first start wearing a pendant, it's like your cadence slows down a little bit. You become more attuned to your natural rhythm or cadence instead of this electromagnetic thing they got us on, this gerbil cage. It's insane.
So time slows down.
It would appear that it slows down, but And that's very viable, by the way, based on what Einstein had to say about it, about time and energy warp. But yeah, not to confuse somebody's mind with that, just look at the properties. And I told you earlier about my research tracing the trail. I have a lineage in my family through my mother to the Shawnee. The Shawnee of Ohio that went to Missouri, the Trail of Tears. And so I've got direct descendancy from that tribe. They're centered around the Chillicothe area, Jackson, Ohio.
Okay.
And so I became very interested in the Serpent Mound. Not that the Shawnee had anything to do with that directly, but it's the mound builders and how they got along with the mound builders. Who knows how long those people were here on this earth? We don't. We can only trace it back to when the white person got here from Europe and started to populate. We can only trace it back to there. There is no history. But these Indians, not savages, they all got along. They didn't kill each other. But they were all here during Hopewell, the Hopewell, which were the mound builders. They built the Great Serpent Mound. They built so many mounds. And see, the Hopewell, in fact, had a tremendous range. They were here back during the day, which has never been written about, but it's of the day of the Great Forest. There were forests everywhere. This was just after the period of where you had the Wisconsinian Ice Age, and the sheet of ice that in fact scraped from the southwest off the tip of Lake Erie and Wisconsin and all of those areas, in fact, created the Tipton Till Plain that created all this scraped off stuff that we got in Ohio. But at one time, they were all covered with giant forests. These were huge forests. And they would go from state to state, all the way down to the Blue Ridge mountain range, all the way to the Appalachians, all the way to the Carolinas, all the way to the forest, which included the pine forest of northern Florida and the Swanee River area. That was the period, if you can imagine that. But there was ecosystems everywhere in a forest. They took care of those things. How did they do that? All right, tracing. I started looking at what the archaeological finds were at Serpent Mound. What I found was they didn't find a whole bunch of old bones. Well, they did, but it wasn't really human. Many were. But they call them Indian burial mounds. It's like, ooh. No. What they found, something called Serpent Mound, if you just go look at an aerial photograph of the Serpent Mound, you'll look and see that's not a serpent. That's a sperm. That's a spermaceti. Look at the head. That's a spermaceti. Look at the flagellum. Look at the profile. That's not a snake. Okay. But it's always been called a snake, and I know who called it a snake. That's the serpent. That's the reptilians. They want you to believe that that's got nothing to do with fertility or conception or reproduction, because that's the one thing that they can't do. And they despise us because we can. They despise us because we can love. They don't want that. They want this world of something else that can only occur in really bad nightmares. Are you still there?
Yes, I am, and I'm
okay.
really listening. I'm really interested in this.
Well, okay, these Indians, in fact, the Hopewell, had travels, and they traveled all the way up through the Iroquois and all the way up through Canada. I mean, just imagine the size of these forests, people. Look at what we once had in America. Okay, we go back to their range. Their range including certain sectors of Pennsylvania where they had these rocks called ringing rocks. Well, they would carry those ringing rocks to places like Serpent Mound, which is what it's called today. But en route, they would stop just southeast of Zanesville, Ohio, to the Great Flint Ridge. That's the only Flint Ridge that occurs between here and somewhere in Missouri, the Ozark Flint Range. But they would travel and they would gather all this flint, this just blue. It's called blue crystal flint, and in fact, the flint stone. It was just they didn't own it, but they in fact used it. And what they would do is stack rocks. And that's the one thing I identified by looking at any piece of information, even handwritten manuals, about some of their surveys or assessments geologically about the mounds themselves. Well, what did they find? They found a lot of stacked rocks. And in many cases, that's how they would describe it, as stacked rocks. But one entry, in fact, something about looking like flintstone.
Uh-huh.
That made sense.
So
the rock underneath it had the same characteristic as the lodestone that occurs in Ringing Rocks, Pennsylvania State Park. Okay, that's lodestone. That's magnetite.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how it was formed. So they would stack the crystal on top of the magnetite. Same thing that we're doing. Now they would in fact utilize this energy. This is what the rain dancers knew. This is what the medicine men knew. This is what the chieftain knew. They knew how to make certain sounds with their feet and with their mouth, and they could get abundant harvest of the crops that they planted, abundant hunting in any season that they talk about. They had a system that could always replenish themselves. But
excuse me a second.
It would replenish everything else as well.
I just got this really bad cold starting, so I'm sorry about this. Continue.
So anyways, that's sort of the up and the down of natural magnetite or lodestone being utilized by these tribes, by these Indians, these unbelievably gifted, peaceful people that they were. We were only, in fact, trained that they were savages. That's a good reptilian trick. But anyways, see, they knew how to attract wildlife. They knew how to reinvigorate their own areas, whatever it was used for. They knew how to bring in their good weather, good rains, good this, good that. See, it's all in harmony with the surface of the earth. None of this stuff that we have today is in harmony with anything. It's just the most chaotic mess. I couldn't even imagine it back when I started studying environmental due diligence. So anyways, today we've got so many things, but everything that's been looked at, and somebody always wants to, oh, crystals, huh? Oh, hocus pocus stuff, huh? What? No, this has got nothing to do with any of that. This is natural stuff, and you've got no clue.
So are these traditions that these Native Americans used, are they still in use today in those?
Only Lone Eagle with the Hopi. He in fact has told me of many things that he still utilizes and still looks at, and looks. It's used in mostly ceremonial stuff, but not the everyday thing that once was. But I guess that's just the Hopewell Indians that I was speaking of. the Shawnee, which I think I have a direct lineage to Tecumseh. I do. You can't prove anything like that, but going through where my great-grandparents came from and where they located to, it's a place called Erin, Ohio. Arion, Ohio. It's on the top of a mountain down there, almost just north of Portsmouth. But these things are real, and through the family, talking to the family, and nobody in the family knows squat about any of this stuff anyways, but every once in a while you get a little bit of scrap of something. So, but looking at other tribes, and please, if someone knows how to do that, go in and look for, don't you dare use the word technology. God, what an embedded word by the reptiles, man. This is methodology. These are methods, not tech. If the word technology exists in a phrase, it's the same as man has something to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with electro-magnetic. Man has something to do with it. This has nothing to do with anything but natural magnetism. I challenge anybody to just go out and see how much they can find out about that without stumbling across the word natural electromagnetic field. I've seen that too. But no matter how you cast it, these particular arrangements have properties, and it's because they have erupted in natural magnetic vortexes or vortices. I'd encourage anybody, in fact, to jump in and do research. Controlling the weather, I just got a comment from a dear friend just last week that said her husband is a airlines pilot, jet pilot, and he was traveling from one place to another, one country to another, and he had his pendant on. He was wearing his pendant, and he remembers what I told him on the phone about these pendants and being able to change weather. There's that word again, radionics. How do you change something just by willing it or thinking? He found out that day that this storm that was in front of him on this radar absolutely went to the right of him. Nothing else was moving, just that storm, and it went to the right of him.
Incredible.
He couldn't believe it. He couldn't wait to get home to tell his wife, who told me. But see, Dr. Lorraine Hurley, I told her on the internet, I said, all you have to do is will this. I know that sounds just crazy, but look, it's your will that can actually pull warm weather from the Gulf into the Ohio River Valley Basin and all the way up through New York, okay? Just by thinking about it. Now, I did take a pendant and put a crystal on top of it. It has two crystals on it, but just put a crystal on top of it. And let's just say if I'm standing right here, for some reason I put it at the southwest corner of the table I was sitting at. So I figured, well, that's southwest to me. And I just took and felt myself pulling with my left hand, not like hocus pocus or abracadabra, no that crap. Just start feeling and wanting warm Gulf moist air to come your way. And it did. Within 3 days, it did. So I've done this many a times. Can't go into detail about all the people that's seen other observations and so on and so forth. But there's thousands.
Okay. Sorry about that. But would you write a paper on radionics?
Oh, I could try.
That would be great.
Well, I could try but it's based on what I understand is what radionics really is, where you can actually, your will, in fact, can overcome even this electromagnetic fog that they got us in.
With the help of those pendants?
The aperture, and all that does it is with the pendants, yes, because it just assists you in what you didn't know that you could do anyways. I guarantee you it will make you feel better with one of these pendants, because all of a sudden you feel some kind of energy that you didn't have before. Well, like the neodymium, electromagnetic neodymium bracelet they put on in the TV commercials. Oh, look, he could barely walk before. Now he could jump jacks or everything. What a fraud. But nonetheless, it's dealing with that one topic, magnetic energy of some form. In that case, electromagnetic. In this case here, natural magnetic. And believe me, natural magnetic trumps electromagnetic every time.
Okay. If I may, I'd like to go back to what you were saying about water sitting on magnetite for 3 days.
Right.
What would the properties of that water be afterwards, or the uses?
Just drinking the water in any shape or form, you're going to be drinking magnetized water. Well, yeah. Oh, hey, great. What's that do? Okay. Probably nothing that you can observe right away, but it does do something. If you have Morgellon syndrome, now, ladies and gentlemen, this is my opinion, okay? And if it's my opinion, I can say whatever I want. I've noticed that these pendants and the magnetic water, the magnetized water, actually reverses the polarity of this thing called electromagnetic Morgellons fibers. That's what I've observed. Therefore, and Dr. Gwen Scott, in fact, does encompass some of that, what I've just said. Yes, she knows that they do. And again, going into details about that right now, we'll do it some other time. But
yeah, maybe another show. But it's fascinating.
I just encourage. What happens when you drink the water? You're hydrating your cells. Now your cells are in fact being hydrated with natural magnetic water that contains the magnopole. Well, these electromagnetic fibers, read the patents. It'll tell you that they in fact have a self-contained onboard battery. I mean, it's just it's an interior core, but it's a battery, and they're stealing electrolytes from your body to power it. And that's not the only thing you're doing. But as soon as that electromagnetic positive encounters a double minus, which is ground energy, that's the form that the magnopole has. It's ground energy. I always looked at it like a minus sign on top of a minus sign. That's the only way I could determine what's ground energy. As soon as it, in fact, encounters the positron, it's going to reverse that entity's polarity, reverse the polarity. And I know they don't know that I figured out how to do that. It reverses the polarity and shuts the replicators down.
So it basically turns them off.
It turns them off.
Or they escape or something.
No, it turns them off. It actually switches them off because it's reversed their polarity. They can't operate like that. They got to have the fundamentals of electromagnetic entity and activity through conductance. And what this does, reverses this polarity. It literally short circuits it.
This is amazing information.
But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, but it's still very, very, very interesting. And
well, tell me this, though. Does it make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes total sense.
Everybody I've told this said the same thing. Dan, this just makes sense, though.
Simple physics, right?
I can't even call it physics. Haven't invented a word to describe it yet, but it's just natural magnetism. We got no clue what those properties are, people. Get busy. But I can tell you there's a whole plethora of things that we don't know about this, which we are supposed to know. But we forgot. It wasn't told us. It was obfuscated, just like they try to eradicate anybody talked about radionics. This is natural radionics. You can control the weather with your will. Your will. There's more stories about these types of things that are currently occurring with people all across the world. Dr. Angie Miranda in the Philippines. It's amazing what she has said about the ability of these apertures, or a semblance of them, to deflect earthquakes, which occurred all around her in the Philippines, in the Manila area. Well, anyways, got to go. I got somebody who wants to serve me supper.
Okay.
It's been a pleasure talking with you tonight. I hope your audience is listening, and
yes.
please send me an email address.
Sure will, and hopefully we get to do this again very soon, and continue on this subject, which is fascinating. I mean, 1 hour is not enough to cover all of this. So I'd like to thank you again, Dr. Mike, for accepting my invitation for this interview, and blessings your way.
Okay, blessings your way. Okay, hey.
Thank you.
All right, good night.
Bye-bye.